Picture this. I'm standing in my kitchen, staring at a half-empty coffee mug, the bitter dregs mirroring the way I've been feeling for far too long. The clock ticks relentlessly on the wall, each second a quiet jab at how little has changed in my world. My name's Candace. I'm 33, and if you were to map out my life, you'd see a straight, uneventful line stretching across the flat plains of suburban Ohio. I've been married to Mark, my high school sweetheart, for 8 years now. We've built a life in this modest little home with its beige walls and predictable routines. He's a mechanic, hands always smudged with grease, coming home with stories of carburetors and cranky customers. I'm a project coordinator at Nexus Innovations, a mid-sized tech firm where I've clocked in over a decade of my life. But let's be real, our days blend into one another like watercolor left out in the rain. Mark and I, we're comfortable, sure, but that spark we once had, it's been snuffed out somewhere between paying bills and arguing over whose turn it is to buy milk. Most nights, we're just two people sharing a space, exchanging words that carry no weight, no heat. It's like we're roommates with a shared history, not lovers building a future. At work, it's no better. I've been at Nexus so long I feel like part of the furniture, reliable, but overlooked. I watch as younger, flashier colleagues with their trendy jargon and bold ideas leapfrog over me for promotions. I'm stuck coordinating timelines and chasing deadlines while they get the pats on the back. My boss, Richard, is 45, all charisma and sharp wit. He's got this way of making everyone feel like they matter, locking eyes with you during a meeting as if your input is the key to the universe. Then there's Ethan, 29, a tech whiz with a boyish grin that could charm a brick wall. Liam, 35, is the sales rep with a laugh that booms across the office and a swagger that screams confidence. And Noah, 31, the quiet data analyst who always seems to be watching, taking in more than he lets on with those thoughtful, piercing eyes. I'm surrounded by these dynamic personalities, yet I feel like a shadow in their midst, invisible unless someone needs a spreadsheet fixed. Lately, I've been wrestling with this gnawing sense of stagnation, like I'm wading through molasses while everyone else races ahead. At home, I'm unseen. At work, I'm unremarkable. It's a heavy weight, this feeling of being stuck, of not mattering in the ways I used to dream I would. So when Richard announced a big celebration for our latest software rollout, a massive project that nearly broke us all, I wasn't exactly jumping for joy. He rented out a countryside retreat in rural Pennsylvania for the whole team, a weekend getaway to bond and unwind. I could barely muster the energy to care. But I packed my bag anyway, figuring I'd go through the motions, just like always. The morning of the trip, I found myself climbing into a rented van with Richard, Ethan, Liam, and Noah. The 3-hour drive to the countryside retreat in rural Pennsylvania stretched ahead of us, and I settled into the back seat, my duffel bag at my feet, staring out the window as the city faded into rolling hills. The mood in the van was buoyant, almost suffocatingly so. Ethan was up front, cracking jokes about the latest office gossip, spinning wild tales about who might have been caught sneaking around the break room after hours. His laughter cut through the air, sharp and infectious, while Liam, behind the wheel, blasted a playlist of 90s hits that had everyone but me singing along to forgotten choruses. Richard chimed in with a few off-key lines, grinning like a kid, and Noah tapped his fingers on the armrest, a small smile tugging at his lips. I stayed quiet, tucked into my corner, feeling like I was watching a movie I wasn't cast in. Their camaraderie was a wall I couldn't scale, a reminder of how out of place I've always felt among them. As the miles ticked by, the landscape shifted. Asphalt gave way to winding dirt roads, and the air through the cracked window grew crisp, carrying the earthy scent of autumn. We finally pulled up to the retreat, and I caught my breath at the sight. It was a sprawling log cabin, nestled among towering pine trees, with a serene lake shimmering just beyond. The golden afternoon light filtered through the branches, casting long shadows across the ground, and the faint smell of wood smoke hung in the air, promising warmth. Stepping out of the van, I felt the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the chill nipping at my cheeks. Inside, the cabin was just as inviting. Plaid furniture arranged around a massive stone fireplace, the kind of place that felt like it held 100 cozy secrets in its walls. Richard took charge as we hauled in our bags, assigning rooms with that natural authority of his. I was given a small space upstairs, nothing fancy, but charming in its simplicity. The window framed a perfect view of the lake, the water catching the last of the day's light like a sheet of glass. I stood there for a moment, hands on the sill, wondering if this weekend might offer something I hadn't expected. A chance to breathe, maybe even to belong. That evening, the party kicked off with a catered dinner. We gathered around a long wooden table, plates piled with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and buttery rolls that melted in your mouth. The room buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, the atmosphere warm but still foreign to me. After dinner, we moved outside to a bonfire, the flames crackling and spitting sparks into the darkening sky. I stood on the fringes, a soda in my hand, the cold can grounding me as I watched the others laugh and swap stories about. As the night deepened at the cabin, the energy from the bonfire lingered in my bones, but it was inside where everything started to shift. The living room was bathed in a soft amber glow from the dimmed lamps, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. Someone, I think it was Ethan, had put on a playlist of slow R&B, the kind of music that wraps around you like a warm blanket, tugging at emotions you didn't even know were there. The air smelled faintly of pine and the sweet tang of wine as glasses were passed around. I found myself near the kitchen counter, holding my first glass of red, the deep crimson catching the light as I took a tentative sip. The warmth of it slid down my throat, spreading through my chest, loosening the tight knot of reserve I always carry. It felt like a small rebellion against my usual self, a quiet dare to let go, just for a moment. Richard approached me then, 2 glasses in his hands, the liquid sloshing gently as he moved with that effortless confidence of his. He handed me another with a smile that felt so genuine it caught me off guard, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Candace, you're the reason this project happened. You're our quiet strength," he said, his voice low and sincere. Those words hit me like a tidal wave, crashing over years of feeling unseen, unappreciated. I stood there, glass trembling slightly in my hand, my mind scrambling for a response. All I could muster was a shy, "Thank you," my voice barely above a whisper as heat rushed to my cheeks, painting them with a flush I couldn't hide. I looked down at the wine, hoping it would mask how flustered I felt, but my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Then Ethan wandered over, his boyish grin in full force, leaning casually against the counter. "He's right, you know," he added, his tone warm. "You're the glue that kept us sane during those late nights. I don't know how we would have made it without you." Before I could process that, Liam's booming laugh cut through the music as he joined us, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Yeah, you're like the office mom, but in the best way possible," he teased, though there was a fondness in his eyes that made the nickname feel like a compliment. And then Noah, who'd been lingering nearby, stepped closer, his presence always so understated yet impossible to ignore. He took my hand gently, his touch light but grounding, and looked at me with those piercing eyes. "You're an inspiration, Candace, just by being so calm and collected," he said softly, and I felt something inside me unravel at the sincerity in his voice. I stood there, surrounded by them, their words wrapping around me like a cocoon, and it was surreal. My heart raced, thumping against my ribs as years of feeling invisible melted away under the weight of their praise. I'd spent so long in the background, unnoticed, that this sudden flood of validation made me dizzy. Or maybe that was the wine, the second glass already half empty in my hand. Either way, I felt like I was floating, untethered from the version of myself I'd always known. The music slowed even further, a sultry beat that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, and the atmosphere shifted into something heavier, more charged. I can't quite recall who touched me first. Maybe it was Liam, his hand brushing my waist during a playful attempt at a dance, his laughter close to my ear. Or maybe it was Ethan, pulling me into a group hug that lingered just a little too long, his warmth seeping through my sweater. It all blurred together after that. Hands, laughter, whispered compliments that sent shivers down my spine. "You're beautiful when you smile like that," someone murmured, and I didn't even know who said it, but it didn't matter. My defenses, the walls I'd built so carefully over the years, crumbled like sandcastles under a wave. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt desired, alive, like I was more than just a name on a roster. I wake up to a pounding in my head, like a hammer striking an anvil over and over, each throb a cruel reminder of last night. My mouth tastes sour, bitter with regret, and I can barely swallow past the lump in my throat. The cabin is eerily quiet as I sit up in bed, the early morning light filtering through the curtains in pale, unforgiving streaks. I strain my ears, listening for any sign of life, but there's nothing. Just the faint creak of the old wooden floors settling. It feels like the world is holding its breath, or maybe it's just me, suffocating under the weight of what I've done. I don't even want to face the others. Don't want to see the judgment, or worse, the knowing looks in their eyes. Are they still asleep, or are they avoiding me just as much as I'm avoiding them? I drag myself out of bed, my limbs heavy as if they're made of lead, and shuffle to the small bathroom attached to my room. The cold tile under my feet sends a shiver up my spine as I fumble with my toothbrush, going through the motions on autopilot. I catch my reflection in the mirror above the sink, and I almost don't recognize myself. My eyes are hollow, shadowed with dark circles, like I've aged a decade overnight. There's a vacancy there, an emptiness that stares back at me, accusingly. I splash cold water on my face, hoping it'll wash away the shame, but it clings to me like a second skin. How did I let things spiral so far out of control? How did I become someone I don't even know? Back in my room, I start packing my bag in silence, each item I fold feeling like a small act of penance. My mind keeps dragging me back to last night, replaying fragments that cut deeper with every memory. I see Richard's intense gaze, the way his eyes seem to see right through me, pulling me in with a force I couldn't resist. Ethan's laughter echoes in my head, so carefree and inviting, drawing me out of my shell. Liam's bold touch lingers on my skin, a memory of warmth that now feels like a brand of guilt. And Noah, quiet, intense Noah. His presence was a silent storm, stirring something in me I didn't know was there. Each thought stabs at my heart, a mix of shame and confusion swirling in my chest. I was caught up in a moment, swept away by attention I'd craved for so long, but at what cost? How could I have betrayed everything I've built, everything I promised to Mark? Downstairs, breakfast is a tense affair. We're all gathered around the same wooden table from last night, but the warmth of that evening is long gone, replaced by a frigid awkwardness that hangs in the air. No one mentions what happened, not a single word about the blurred lines we crossed. Richard tries to fill the silence with small talk about the project, his voice a little too bright, like he's forcing normalcy. Ethan keeps his head down, scrolling through his phone with an intensity that feels like a shield. Liam cracks a weak joke about the burnt toast, but it falls flat, his usual booming laugh reduced to a hollow chuckle. Noah won't even look at me. His eyes are fixed on his plate, pushing around a piece of bacon like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. I keep my own gaze lowered, focusing on the cold coffee in my mug, the bitter taste matching the one in my soul. Every clink of a fork, every scrape of a chair feels amplified, like we're all just waiting for someone to shatter the fragile pretense we're holding on to. The drive back to Ohio is suffocating. We pile into the van, the same seats as before, but the energy couldn't be more different. There are long stretches of silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of someone shifting uncomfortably. I stare out the window, watching the trees blur past, their bare branches clawing at the gray sky. My thoughts drift to Mark, waiting at home, completely oblivious to the storm I'm carrying back with me. He'll probably be in the "It's Sunday morning," and I'm sitting at my desk in the empty office of Nexus Innovations, the silence around me so thick it feels like a weight on my shoulders. The familiar hum of the air conditioning is the only sound, a low drone that usually fades into the background, but today seems to echo in my ears, amplifying the loneliness of this moment. My desk is cluttered with project files, sticky notes curling at the edges, and a half-empty coffee cup from Friday that I never got around to tossing. But my eyes aren't on the mess. They're locked on a small framed photo propped up against my monitor, a snapshot of Mark and me from our 5th anniversary. We're on a beach, the sun setting behind us in a blaze of orange and pink, our smiles wide and genuine as we lean into each other, arms wrapped tight. I remember that day so clearly, the salty breeze, the way his laughter mingled with the crash of the waves. Looking at it now, though, it's not warmth I feel. It's a gut punch, a sharp, searing pain that steals my breath. The realization crashes over me like a tidal wave, relentless and cold. While Richard, Ethan, Liam, and Noah were caught up in the high of our project's success, lost in celebration and the haze of too much wine. I've done something unforgivable. I've destroyed something sacred, not just in my marriage, but deep inside myself. My hands start to tremble, the photo frame shaking as I grip it too hard. I set it down before I drop it, but the damage is already done. Tears spill over, hot and unstoppable, dripping onto the desk and smearing the ink on a stray memo. My chest tightens, like a vice is squeezing my heart, making every breath a struggle. I can barely get the words out, but they escape in a broken whisper. What have I done? My voice cracks, echoing in the empty room, and it feels like I'm confessing to the walls, to the ghosts of who I used to be. I think about that night at the retreat, the way I let myself get swept up in the attention, in the fleeting thrill of feeling wanted. It was like I was someone else, someone reckless, someone who didn't have a husband waiting at home, trusting me with his whole heart. But now, in the harsh light of reality, I see it for what it was, a betrayal, a moment of weakness that's left a permanent stain on my soul. No amount of praise from Richard, no pat on the back from Ethan or Liam, no quiet admiration from Noah can fill the void I've created. No promotion, no recognition. Nothing can replace the trust I've shattered, not just with Mark, but with myself. I've lost a piece of my integrity, and I don't know if I'll ever get it back. I sit there, staring at the photo through blurry eyes, and I imagine confessing to Mark. I picture his face, the way his kind, steady gaze would falter, the hurt that would carve lines into his features as he processes what I've done. I can almost hear his voice, soft but broken, asking why, how I could let this happen. The thought paralyzes me, rooting me to this chair as fear coils tight in my stomach. What would he say? Would he even look at me the same way again? Could we survive something like this? Or would it be the end of everything we've built over the last 8 years? My mind spirals, and I grip the edge of the desk, trying to anchor myself, but the panic doesn't let up. I think about the workplace too. Those silent, tense moments on the drive back from Pennsylvania. The way no one could meet my eyes at breakfast. What if this gets out? What if Richard or one of the others lets something slip, even by accident? Will I be judged, whispered about in the break room, ostracized by the very people who made me feel seen for the first time in years? The thought of walking into the office tomorrow, facing their knowing glances, or worse, their pity, makes my skin crawl. I've traded a fleeting rush, a momentary escape from my mundane life, for a scar on I'm driving home now, the hum of the engine a steady drone beneath the chaos in my mind. The streets of suburban Ohio roll past in a blur of familiar houses and manicured lawns, but it all feels alien to me, like I'm a stranger in my own life. My hands grip the steering wheel so tight my knuckles are white, as if holding on for dear life can somehow keep the pieces of me from falling apart. The weight of what I've done sits heavy in my chest, a stone that grows sharper with every mile closer to home. I can still feel the echoes of that night at the retreat, the way I let myself get lost in a moment that wasn't mine to take. It's not just guilt. It's a deep, aching sorrow for the person I used to be, the one who believed in promises and meant them with every fiber of her being. As I pull into our driveway, the sight of our modest home hits me like a punch. The beige siding, the little flower bed I planted last spring, the porch swing where Mark and I used to sit on quiet evenings. It all looks so innocent, so untouched by the storm raging inside me. Through the living room window, I see him, Mark, sprawled on the couch, the flickering light of the TV casting shadows across his face. He's watching a football game, probably cheering for his favorite team, completely unaware of the fracture I've brought back with me. His posture is relaxed, one arm draped over the back of the couch, a beer on the coffee table. It's such a normal scene, so painfully ordinary, and it tears at me because I know I don't belong in it anymore, not really. I sit there in the car, engine idling, unable to move. My hands are still on the wheel, fingers trembling now, as I wrestle with the decision that's been haunting me since I left the retreat. Do I walk in there and shatter his world with the truth? Do I confess the betrayal, the way I let myself be swept away by fleeting desires, and risk losing everything we've built? Or do I bury this secret deep, carry it like a silent poison, and pretend I'm still the woman he married? The thought of either path makes my stomach churn, a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. Minutes pass, maybe 5, maybe 10. I don't know. Time feels like it's slipping through my fingers, just like everything else. Finally, I cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening. I grab my bag from the passenger seat, the weight of it pulling at my shoulder as I step out into the cool evening air. Each step toward the front door feels like I'm walking to my own judgment, my boots crunching on the gravel with a sound that seems too loud in the stillness. I fumble with my keys, the metal cold against my palm, and push the door open. The familiar scent of home, faint traces of Mark's aftershave, the lingering aroma of whatever he cooked for dinner, wraps around me, but it doesn't comfort me. It only deepens the ache. Mark glances over from the couch, his face lighting up with a casual smile, oblivious to the turmoil I'm drowning in. "Hey, how was the retreat?" he asks, his voice warm, easy, like nothing in the world could be wrong. I force a smile, my lips trembling with the effort, and mumble, "It was fine," the lie tasting like ash on my tongue. My heart is a hammer in my chest, each beat screaming the truth I can't voice, but I turn away before he can see the cracks in my facade. I move through the motions like a ghost in my own house. I hang my coat on the rack by the door, the fabric slipping through my fingers as if I'm not fully here. My bag hits the floor with a dull thud, and I unzip it slowly, pulling out clothes that still carry the faint scent of pine from the cabin, a cruel reminder of where I've been, of what I've done. I fold each item with mechanical precision, stacking them on the counter, avoiding Mark's gaze as he calls out a comment about the game, something about a bad call by the "Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.